Pearl Harbor is a bay in Hawaii which is located in the Pacific Ocean.
Pearl Harbor, America's mid-Pacific naval bastion.
Gentle and lyrical, seems to suggest what the islands are like. For here are islands of paradise.
Imperialism motivated the United States to annex Hawaii in 1898. The Spanish-American War, which also occurred at this time, proved Pearl Harbor to be a useful naval base for the United States, and thus resources were devoted to expanding the naval base in the early 1900s. By the 1930s, American presence in Hawaii had increased significantly.
Hawaii at that time was a peaceful recreation tourist area. That was choice duty.
It may be the gleaming whiteness of a sandy beach. At Honolulu, they are met in the traditional Hawaiian fashion.
At the same time in the Pacific Ocean, the Empire of Japan was growing ever more militaristic and power-hungry. Japan was, similarly to the United States, an imperialist country. In 1937, Japan invaded the Republic of China and the Second Sino-Japanese War began. This escalated tensions between the United States and Japan as the U.S. viewed this invasion as overly aggressive and a violation of war code. In response to the invasion, the United States froze Japanese assets and declared an embargo on petroleum shipments and other vital war materials to Japan. By late 1941, the United States had severed practically all commercial and financial relations with Japan. This did not slow Japan in their quest for power, though, because in July of 1941, Japan occupied all of French Indochina and was officially allied with the Axis powers. Tensions between Japan and the United States had been building for months prior to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941.
Here is the actual bombing of the mighty USS Arizona by Jap planes. These pictures were made by a fearless cameraman who thought nothing of his personal safety to make possible this record for all posterity. A single lucky hit was responsible for the disaster that befell the Arizona when a Jap bomb falling directly through one of the battleship's funnels exploded in the engine room and set ablaze tons of fuel oil. Your commentator is Joe O'Brien.
Breaking news. The attack on Pearl Harbor started this morning, just before 8 a.m. on December 7, 1941. America would have never guessed that Japan would attack our country like this. The U.S. government did not anticipate that Japan would attack Pearl Harbor because it's 3,500 miles away. The commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet received a message from the Navy about a war warning only hours before the actual attack. This message did not mention Pearl Harbor as a potential place of attack. A message was sent to Pearl Harbor to stay on alert, but the message did not deliver till after the Japanese destroyed Pearl Harbor. Hundreds of Japanese fighter jets descended onto the base, destroying nearly 20 American naval vessels, 8 battleships, and over 300 airplanes. More than 2,400 Americans died in this attack, which included 68 civilians, and another 1,000 were wounded. Japan took a lighter hit, only losing 29 aircrafts and a few mini-submarines. This is a day that will live in infamy.
Once the attack was over, the damage was apparent. The harbor was mostly destroyed after the multiple airstrikes from Japanese forces. By the end of the attack, 17 ships were hit and sunk. All but 3 of the sunken ships were brought back to the surface of the water, able to be repaired and put back into action in the war. The USS Arizona, one of the ships sunk at Pearl Harbor, was unsalvageable and still sits in the harbor, serving as a memorial to the event. The very next day, President Roosevelt delivered his famous infamy speech. in which he addressed the unprovoked attack and asked Congress to allow him to declare war.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The U.S. declared war on Japan. 3 days later, due to a pact between the three countries, Germany and Italy backed Japan and declared war on the U.S. as well. The U.S. then returned the gesture, declaring war on Germany and Italy. Due to our alliance, Britain had actually declared war on Japan already due to other attacks in the Pacific South, and Winston Churchill's promise to declare war on Japan within the hour of a Japanese attack on the U.S. Because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, America had no choice but to become involved in World War II, and this attack on December 7th, 1941, can be directly attributed as the reason America joined the war. Japan had hoped that America would be entering the war with a damaged and crippled navy. But despite the bombing at Pearl Harbor Naval Base, the Navy was not as crippled as Japan wished or realized. On the home front, only hours after the attack, Japanese American citizens were being rounded up and put in internment camps in the U.S. Through Executive Order 9066, President Roosevelt made a policy for citizens of Japanese descent to be gathered and isolated in these camps. The Japanese internment camps are considered to be the most atrocious violation of American civil rights during the 20th century. As many as 117,000 people were affected. Only hours after the attack, FBI agents rounded up 1,291 Japanese community and religious leaders, transferring them to places in Montana, New Mexico, and North Dakota. Many of these people who were rounded up were not able to tell their families and stayed for the duration of the war. And the most devastating consequence that was ultimately a result of Pearl Harbor was the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Japan. At least 100,000 people died instantly, and at least the same number, but most likely more, were killed due to effects of the bomb after they dropped.